Thank you. Thank you, John. Yes. The time when we went into the Garden of Gethsemane was after our last supper with Jesus before he was crucified. And he took us to the garden. He took James and John and myself a little bit further and said to us, watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. And then he went further off and prayed. And I have to be honest with you, that phrase, watch and pray lest you enter into temptation, didn't mean a lot to me back then, but it does now. I understand better that it's so easy for us to fall into the temptations that the world is offering us. But we need to be watchful in prayer, because our prayer focuses us on Jesus, and it'll focus us on what life is and being victorious, so we don't fall into temptation. Now, Jesus went off a little bit further and went down on his knees and began to pray, and we sat down on our rocks, and I thought, to be honest with you, I wasn't much of a praying man back in those days. But I tried to be watchful. And when I was listening, I could hear that Jesus was in agony. And I heard him say, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. What was this cup he was talking about? Well, it could only be the cup of his death that he talked about it when we had communion together in the upper room. And then he went on and said, but not my will be done, but yours, Father. So that battle that was in him, in his human flesh, not wanting to die, but knowing in his spirit to be obedient to the Father, he went all the way for you and for I. And that battle in the garden, it went to such a point that he began to even sweat blood. Well, you know, James, John, and I, we watched for a little bit, but then tiredness overtook us and we fell asleep. I don't know how long it was, but next thing I know, Jesus was shaking me and he gently rebuked me. He says, could you not tarry even an hour? And then he said this, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I knew it in that time in my life, I was led by the dictates of my natural man, of the dictates of the flesh. Oh, my desires here and there. I was running this way and that way. Brave one moment, afraid the next moment. Let my mouth run away with me. Well, my flesh was tired and it fell asleep. My spirit wanted to stay awake for Jesus, wanted to pray with him, but it didn't. I was still a man led by the things of this world, by the things of my own flesh. And this happened 3 times, and finally Jesus shakes us the 3rd time and says, look, they are coming. And we could see men, a multitude of them with torches, coming towards us in the garden. And at their lead was Judas. Our brother in arms. And he came up to Jesus, kissed him on the cheek, and said, Rabbi. Jesus says, do what you came for. Well, you know, I had a sword. And when the servant came up to grab Jesus, I pulled up my sword and not being a military man, I missed his neck and sliced off his ear. I was soundly rebuked by Jesus. He says, those that carry the sword, those that live by the sword, die by the sword. And then he did something that totally amazed me. In a moment when his life hung in the balance, he took the ear and he healed Malchus, that servant. In that moment, the high priest's servant. And he healed him. Well, they grabbed Jesus and we all fled. And I fled away a little distance. And then John and I followed secretly. And we came to the high priest's house. Came to the place of Caiaphas. And we went around the fire that was in the courtyard and sat there. And John knew some of the people that were there, knew of that family, and was able to get us in. I tried to be secretive. I didn't want to sit too close to the fire. I tried to stay in the shadows, but I was recognized as one who followed Jesus. 3 times they kept asking me, "Are you one of those followers of Jesus of Nazareth?" And I kept saying, "No, I don't know the guy. I've never heard of the man." I even cursed. And finally, even as Jesus had declared to me in the upper room that by the time the cock crowed twice, I would deny him, it happened just as he said. And in that moment, I looked at Jesus and he looked at me with such compassion in his eyes. I couldn't take it. I had denied my Lord. I ran out of that place and I wept bitter tears. Thank God that Jesus loved me more than my foolishness, more than my bravado, more than my fear. He cares for you. Even though I had betrayed him and I had denied him in that moment, Jesus restored me in the days that were ahead. After he had risen from the grave, he restored me in his love. Brothers and sisters, his blood was shed for you and for me. Well, even in that garden of Gethsemanee, when he sweated that blood, he came to set us free. Our wills were locked up in slavery to sin, but Jesus declared in that moment, "Not my will, Father, but your will be done." He came and brought freedom in our will so that we can serve God. After the resurrection, I too was set free. Jesus said, "Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep, Peter." What I could not do before in my weakness, in the flesh, I would do in the days ahead in the Spirit. You don't have to be in slavery. You can be free today. You don't have to be heavy-hearted, burdened down by sin. Jesus came to set you free so that you can say yes to Jesus and no to sin. God bless you.